Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast. We are ranking the top 50 greatest Kansas City Chiefs of all time. And today we've got numbers 30 through 26. Fellas, let's get into it. How you doing today? Adam Best, Sterling Holmes, Matt Connor, you guys good? You ready to talk some Chiefs?
Always ready, baby. Always a good day when you're talking Chiefs.
Anytime, anywhere, right?
We're going to dive in to the list. Again, we're at number 30, and we got to get to Mr. Jerry Mays. Jerry Mays, one of the old timers here for the Chiefs. Interesting rankings from all of us here. Connor, you had him at 21, Sterling at 30. I had him at 24. Adam Best, you had him at 40. So why don't we start with you? Why the low ranking here for Jerry?
Again, the guys who played primarily in the AFL, a little bit of a discount there. I wanted the bulk of your career to be in Kansas City, and that's why some of the more transient players got punished a little bit too. You gotta come up with some things to kind of slim and condense this list down to 50, or otherwise it would be 100. There are a lot of great Chiefs, but he's a hell of a player. 8-time All AFL, part of the vaunted front four with Buck Buchanan and Curley Culp and Aaron Brown, and part of that Super Bowl team in 1970. So I definitely think he belongs. The question is how high, and do you consider him more Texan or more Chief?
I guess I look at it, it's one organization, right? He's a Chief, part of the legacy, part of the history of who they ended up becoming. What about you, Sterling? For obviously, if you're not familiar, Jerry was a defensive end for the Chiefs, as Adam pointed out, that great line that the Chiefs had in the championship season. But Sterling, you were at 30 here, so you were the second farthest away. Connor and I were a little bit higher. Give us your reasoning here.
Yeah, I think 30 was a fair spot. Kind of, if you count the AFL, if you count that the fact I've never seen him, so you have to go off what was written and what was said about him. But again, he was a captain in both Super Bowl I as well as in Super Bowl IV. I get what Best is saying. I don't have quite that sort of discount because again, when you look at it, it's the Kansas City Chiefs Hall of Fame. You look around the Ring of Honor when you go to Arrowhead, you'll see Jerry Mays' name up there, 6-time AFL All-Star again. But when you are a captain on Super Bowl I and Super Bowl IV, that tells you not just how good he was, but also what the organization and his teammates think about him. So for that's why I have him at 30.
That's a great point about the captainship. It's one of those things where we hear a lot more about players, I think, nowadays than we used to with social media, and there's all kinds of stories and stuff, and everybody's got a megaphone. Back in the day, you had a couple papers to read, and that was it. And that was if the sports reporter decided to tell you a little bit of background about a guy, you got access, and otherwise you didn't know, and you had to look at things like that. Is he a captain? Is he out there when they're doing the coin toss? Those types of things. Now, Connor, you and I had him in the 20s. I was looking at somebody who was drafted by both the NFL and the AFL, wanted to play a little bit closer to home. So goes and plays with the Texans and then moves over to Kansas City. What was your thinking here on your ranking of Jerry Mays?
Yeah, to me, he just stands out as like one of the true greats for that whole first decade of the franchise. The guy never misses a single game. He's immediately lauded in his career. It's not like he needs a year or 2 or 3 to step up. It's like from the get-go, his peers are like, oh, he's the best. And he was never not the best. For a full decade, he's got as many all-pro nods almost as he does years played. So you just think, okay, you've got some good durability, you've got longevity. And for that full longevity, you were recognized as one of the best at your job. Sacks were unofficial in those days. We don't have a perfect read on all the metrics there, but like Pro Football Reference throws him 63.5 sacks or something like that, to his credit during that time in that era. It just seems like one of the most feared linemen in those nascent days. And I just think so few, we look at like even Eric Berry, Jamal Charles, some of these guys like who have the injuries and whatnot. Remember, we were debating Larry Johnson on a previous episode. When he was great, he was great. But here's a guy who's like, he was never not great. For that reason, I'm going to jump you to the front of the line.
Yeah, I mean, when you stack up the accolades from his career, right? First of all, drafted by both of these leagues. 6-time AFL All-Star, 2-time first-team All-AFL, a 6-time second-team All-AFL, a Pro Bowler in 1970, a 3-time AFL champion in 62, 66, and 69, and of course, a Super Bowl champion. And then he's on the AFL all-time team, of course, the Chiefs Hall of Fame. That is one hell of a resume to get you high up on this list. I'm surprised he's not a little bit higher. Just a fantastic career from Mays. And just, I think, as you pointed out, all of you kind of pointed out to a little bit of a degree, like, he just set the table, like, for this franchise that we all fell in love with when we were younger kids. And these were the stories and the guys that you heard about growing up about, oh yeah, like, because look, let's be honest here. Like, when we were all growing up, the Chiefs were not a great football team. And so what you heard about was one thing I remember always being proud about was the Chiefs played in Super Bowl I. And even though they lost, like, they were in the very first Super Bowl, and then they won Super Bowl IV. And I always had that to hang my hat on, even though I didn't get to see them, as like, all right, like, this is a historic franchise. We're not the Jaguars or something like that. Like, this is a historic franchise, and one day we'll be returned to glory. And I've been fortunate enough to live long enough to see that happen. And so it's guys like this that pave the way for what's happening now. And shout out to Jerry Mays, God rest his soul. All right, let's move on to number 29. We're getting into it now, you guys. Can you believe we're in the 20s already? Number 29, and this one is going to be Matt Connor's absolute favorite position to talk about. Let me just make sure I've got the order right here. Yes, it is. It's Jan Stenerud at number 29, the kicker in the Hall of Fame. So we've got to start with Matt Connor. I want you to sing the phrases of Jan Stenerud.
I had him at number 33 overall. If you've missed our other episodes, I'm taking strays here because I've discounted specialists this whole time. Unlike these guys, I didn't put 10 long snappers, 16 punters, and 24 kickers on my list. I think Cairo Santos is somewhere in Sterling's top 10.
Hey, don't you dare. Don't you dare. He was a damn good kicker.
Yeah.
Did you exclude the X Factor? I mean,
to me, you got to give the nod to Stenerud. You know, he's the original great. He's like, hey, if we're going to honor this position, you got to start here. So for that reason, he's a legend. He's been a class act around the franchise for a long time. Celebrated at his position on the field, celebrated off the field, a wonderful ambassador for the franchise overall. Again, I'm never excited about kickers. Even at 33, I ranked him lower than all of you. So I'm going to let all of you tell why you put your kicker wings on and fly. But yeah, at the very least, I'll give him this much.
This dude kicked forever. His first season in KC was in 1967, and he was still kicking in the NFL for the Minnesota Vikings in 1985 when I was 2 years old. Absolutely incredible. Sterling, you had him, I think, ranked, what was it, 20th? Very high from Sterling Holmes. Give us your reasoning there.
Okay, multiple reasons, but one, he was a game changer, not just for how good he was for Kansas City, but the fact that he helped evolve the game in the NFL and kicking as we know it. He's one of the first place kickers to use the soccer style technique. During his first 3 years as a pro, he hit 70% of his field goals compared to a 53% average for the other kickers in the AFL and NFL. He was one of the first kickers to actually be just a kicker. Like a lot of guys and a lot of teams had, okay, you're our quarterback. Well, you're also our kicker. No, this guy was a dedicated kicker. He was so good. They're like, we'll find a way. We're going to create a position basically just for you. That is how good and how much of a weapon he was. It's the history that he brings to the NFL. On a personal note as well, he was one of the first, I think actually the first interview I've ever done with a professional athlete. It was Jan Stenerud. And he was so gracious and so kind and just one of those ones that you're like, you know what? Yeah, you're right, Matt. He was great on the field, but also off it. He was a steward of the game. One of the, two kickers in the National Football Hall of Fame? He's one of them. I mean, come on now. We're literally talking about the best of the best at his position. And for that reason, he's 20th in my book. It's hard ranking special teamers, Matt. I completely understand that. But what he did for Kansas City, the historic factor he brings to the game, and just the historic nature of what he meant to the game of football. He's 20.
Yeah, it's hard to. I'm trying to figure out how many kickers are in the Hall. Did Morton Anderson get into the Hall of Fame?
I think there's 3, actually. I believe there's 3.
It depends on where you look. There may be like weird wings or only kickers, guys that kicked that got in for other positions, but we can dive into that another time. Adam Best, your ranking here for Jan Stenerud. I think you had him at 28.
Well, first kicker ever enshrined in the NFL Hall of Fame. So he's a pioneer in multiple ways. Norwegian born, kind of paved the way for foreign born NFL players. Really, as Sterling alluded to, kind of changed the game for kickers. Multi-time All-Pro, second in scoring in Kansas City Chiefs history. That has to count for something. I do have a bit of a problem with how we count scoring, though, because we're only giving Patrick Mahomes or Len Dawson scoring when they actually like cross the plane of the end zone. So, you have to kind of weigh that in when we're talking about all-time scores. But that's the way they calculate the scoring. So he is second to only Nick Lowry, another member of this list. You can't talk about the history of this franchise without especially if you want to talk about like the trailblazers and groundbreaking members of this franchise that helped change the game. He is one of the guys that kind of started that.
It is called football. The longevity being, I think he was the first like true kicker to go into the Hall of Fame, like all of those things. We talk a lot about history in this list, being a trailblazer. He was certainly that. And just the longevity tells you everything you need to know, that teams still wanted this guy kicking for them. In 1985, I mean, he saw some stuff in the NFL going from 67 to 85. That's incredible. I want to ask you guys just a little side tangent here, since we're talking about kickers. Is Harrison Butker going to make it to the Hall of Fame, in your opinion? What does he need to do to make it to the Hall of Fame to get in there with Jan?
I mean, 15 more years.
Yeah, I look
at, there's only 2 actual kicker onlys in the NFL Hall of Fame. I looked it up. It's Jan and Morton Anderson. You have George Blanda, who also played quarterback. You had Lou, who was also a tackle, and then you had a punter. You had Lou Guy, or you had Ray Guy. That's it.
No Vinatieri. Vinatieri won 4 titles, not yet, but he won 4 championships with the Patriots. So
I mean,
this
Justin
is a question
Tucker might not get in.
This is a question from 2033.
Yeah.
I think Vinatieri is going to get in there. And I think that Harrison Butker is
going to get in there. Dude, we're talking, he's got to play for another 15 years. And because right now, Justin Tucker is the best kicker of this generation. The best kicker of the generation doesn't always make it to the NFL Hall of Fame. Like the second best kicker is not going to make it. So that's what makes it so hard. He's going to have to play for another 15 years when Justin Tucker's retired and still be the best kicker in the NFL. That's so damn hard.
And stack Lombardis.
I think he's going to. I think he's going to stack Lombardis. I think statistically, he's right there with some of the greatest kickers of all time, despite the injury. If he's able to continue to do it, and then yes, you guys are right. Like he probably does have to kick forever. Vinatieri was from 1996 to 2019, so he's going to have to stick. I mean, it's just
the clutch factor, though. The clutch factor. He's a lot of the times the Chiefs have won and advanced. He has had pivotal kicks that have either won the game or contributed to them winning.
It's the big kicks. I think that's when I think about comps. I think about Vinatieri, right? Like all these big kicks, clutch kicks. Harrison Butker has a lot of that already. He just needs to go. When my son, who will be born here in about 3 weeks, when he's graduating high school, we'll all meet up again, and we'll have a podcast about. It's a date. Is Harrison Butker a Hall of Famer?
It's a date.
Yeah, it's a date. We're going to do this.
That's what happens.
Matt Connor, he wants to date me.
Roughly 18 years, 19 years from now.
It's possible. I mean, we started AA 17 years ago, and here we are, right? So it's possible. This thing is going to withstand the test of time, folks.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm not qualified to do anything else.
Hey, 2 points about kickers. You mentioned Vinatieri. When you think of the names associated with the Patriots dynasty, below Brady, like Vinatieri is as ubiquitous and well-known as any other name you want to attach to that franchise.
Gronk.
Maybe other than Belichick. I think if you know the name Gronk, you know the name Vinatieri. I think if you know the name Moss, you know the name Vinatieri. I think if you know the name Edelman, you know the name Vinatieri. And so, to me, I think there's something to what Patrick's saying. If the kicker attached to the dynasty has the longevity, which is what you guys are saying, I think there's something there. That said, we should note that our entire conversation around this started with the word yawn, which I totally think is apropos because this puts me to sleep. When your name is Yawn Stenerud, I'm saying, yeah, I agree. Let's move on.
All right, let's do it. Let's go on to our next one. A guy I grew up watching, number 28 on our list, and that is a defensive player, a cornerback. Can you guys guess who it is? I guess you guys know who it is. It's Dale Carter, and we were all pretty close in our rankings here. Connor, you had him at 28, Sterling at 25, I had him at 32, and Adam at 26. Adam, why don't we start with you on this one? Talk to me about Dale Carter. Tell all these young whippersnappers who just jumped on during the Mahomes era about Dale Carter.
Man, he was something. He took the league by storm, won Defensive Rookie of the Year in 1992, 7 interceptions, and really, I think, was the third pillar of that Marty Ball defense, along with Neil Smith and Derek Thomas, and later perhaps became the most fearsome tandem of quarterbacks in Chiefs history with James Hasty. Now, Snead and McDuffie had a pretty good year last year, but these guys did it for a while. So unfortunately, he went out to Denver. I tried to not let that stain his resume too much, but it does a little bit. You go to become a Raider or a Bronco, that leaves a bad taste in our mouth, and Neil Smith is the same way. But he was a hell of a corner, really just a staple in one of the better defenses in franchise history. And at a time where defense and running the ball kind of was all they had to hang their hat on.
I departed really quickly because I have a Dale Carter football card here.
Nice.
Isn't that beautiful? I thought I had his rookie card. And that's what popped into my head was like, don't I have Dale Carter's rookie card? But I don't. Actually, I have 2 of these. So maybe we should raffle one off. I do. Hold on. I have Dale Carter's rookie card. Let me pull it up.
You are the biggest Dale Carter supporter I know. This is awesome.
Rookie force.
I know, and you just jetted. We didn't know where you're going. You look like Dale Carter breaking on a pass.
That I was like, I have Dale Carter's rookie card, don't I? And then I opened my book here and I had Greg Hill's rookie card. And I was like, oh, crap. But no, there it is. Probably not worth anything because they made 1 billion of these.
Yeah, you ran away for 30 cents.
Right? I mean, it's worth more than I paid for it. All right, Connor, talk to me about Dale Carter, man.
We all love Dale Carter, right? I mean, I remember watching, I think Duron Cherry retired in 91. And with his departure, there's this giant chasm in the secondary of like, who's going to step in? And then DC comes in. He's an instant hit. And really for the next 5 or 6 years, he turns into a perennial Pro Bowler, All-Pro, a lockdown corner. The Chiefs defense was what you wanted to watch. Like, I looked forward to the defense taking the field because Derek Thomas, Neil Smith were going to do their thing. And few things were a lot of the offensive fireworks went around at times in some of those years. And so you were looking forward to like another, like, are they going to sack him? It was thrilling. And then Dale Carter provided the fireworks behind them, just doing what he did. He was so thrilling to watch. The Chiefs should have had a void there. They didn't. Their secondary remained powerful because they hit on that draft pick. He was just one of those, like, if you watched him, he was Marcus Peters before Marcus Peters for a few years. And so when I was watching Marcus, that's what it felt like I was watching again. A young, dynamic ball hawk who just had uncanny instincts for where the ball was probably going to end up. And sure, you get burned every once in a while, but just like you take L'Jarius Sneed's like overly physical defensive style and it turns into penalties, just like you're like, I'll take that for the presence he brings on the field. Carter and Peters had that same sort of thing. So I loved watching him. I'm sure you guys did too, right, Adam?
Oh, I loved watching him. And I think that's an apt comparison there because they were both top 20 picks who Didn't last super long in Kansas City, but definitely made their mark as two of the better corners in franchise history. And yeah, I loved watching that defense. That defense really is what got me into Chiefs football to this extent. I was already a fan because my dad was a fan, but this group of defenders, they animated Arrowhead in a way that separated it from the other stadiums in the National Football League. And it's been separated really in Seattle ever since. So I think he is part of the Arrowhead mystique. Like we said, DT and Neil Smith and all those other guys, James Hasty.
4 straight Pro Bowls too. I will also point out, even when he went to Denver, he was still helping Kansas City because he signed the NFL's highest paid defensive back contract in the NFL. And then he was suspended due to a substance abuse violation. Then he was released. So, I mean, he was still helping the Chiefs out even when he left. He just was like, you know what? I love Kansas City. Just Denver, sorry. We're gonna stick it to you. He played for a few more teams after that, New Orleans, the Ravens. But all of his great years came here as a Chief. He's remembered as a Chief. He was electric as a Chief. Dale Carter. I think you're right, Matt Connolly. You know, like after Teron Cherry, the torch just kept. It was like a 4x1. You just passed the baton, and DC ran with it.
And it started with Emmitt Thomas, right? He was the original baton holder, and it's just all the way to McDuffie now.
Don't forget, Dale Carter got ejected for kicking Michael Irvin.
Did a cloud of cocaine come up when he kicked him?
Back then, yeah, between the two of them, he kicked Michael Irvin. In a loss. But yeah, I mean, look, he was a defensive rookie of the year. I think the comparisons to Marcus Peters are really apt. Like he played just like Peters, bounced from team to team. Kansas City, then went to Denver, then went to Minnesota, then went to New Orleans, then was in Baltimore, where all troubled cornerbacks eventually find their way to. They end up in Baltimore. Look, he was a fun player during an era where the Chiefs defense was more fun to watch than the offense for the most part, right? Like they were incredible, and you get Neil Smith and Derek Thomas and like these incredible defenses with Marty. That was the strength of the team. Didn't get what we wanted out of it all, but he was definitely one of those guys that you remembered. And when I would play Chiefs football in my bedroom, and I used to I would throw the ball to myself and dive onto my bed and make catches, and then I would record whichever player I was. Sometimes I would do a little defense too and do some Dale Carter interceptions and write them down in my notebook. Like Dale Carter, 4 interceptions of Elway against the Broncos in Patrick Allen's childhood bedroom.
Do you still have these videos? Or
I didn't make videos. I didn't make videos of them. I was just a child enjoying the enchantment of my youth, pretending that I was on the Kansas City. Did you guys do this when you were kids? Like, did you play football with yourselves? Like, go out in the backyard and throw the ball up real high and then run and catch it and pretend you were various Chiefs players?
It's a little harder in football. I definitely did that with basketball. You pretend someone's guarding you and you take the last shot. But football, I mean, you're an actor. I mean, you are more talented than us in this regard. I mean, that takes a wild imagination to be all these different parts. And I think you're the only one of the group.
I kind of feel bad for Patrick, honestly. He goes had to throw the ball to myself. Like no friends, no one there to
just
toss the rock to you.
I didn't need friends, man. I had Derek Thomas.
You had Gunther Cunningham's defense, right?
Yeah, man. I
needs
had
friends.
Gunther Cunningham screaming at me, and I had a Joe Montana. Remember those little buddies? Little stuffed Joe Montana with the arms like this? My sister still has one, by the way. Those pillows.
Were those my buddies?
I think they were called My Buddies. Yeah, something like that.
My buddies and me.
Yes, because they had kid sister.
All right, next up, we're going to number.
Next up on the list, let's move on to 27, and we're back to an old timer and Curley Culp. Curley Culp, one of the all-time greatest old-timey football names. Let's dive into the rankings to see where everybody had Curley here.
I had him next to Larry and Mo.
Yeah.
Y'all were drunk when you did this one, by the way.
So I had him at 25. Adam had him at 21. Sterling had him at 19, so in the top 20. And then curmudgeonly Matt Connor ranks him
Realistically,
at 43. So why don't you explain yourself?
You guys go first.
Okay, yeah, I'll explain myself. How are you so high on Jerry Mays? And then Curley comes around and you're like, you know what? No.
Wait, I was going to ask you the same thing, right? You just said, how does Jerry Mays, decorated every year of his 10-year career with the Chiefs, go that high? And then I'm looking at Curley Culp, who went to 2 Pro Bowls in like 7 seasons with the Chiefs before he then goes on. Is this an Oilers podcast? Are we celebrating Oilers players? Because that's when he did.
No, they finally gave him the recognition when he moved to a bigger metro area. Right?
That's it.
And
that's it.
A year after leaving the Chiefs, he finally becomes Defensive Player of the Year.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
He's a nose tackle, and he was a very, very, very good nose tackle. And like any great duo, whether it's Lethal Weapon or Outcast, you have one member who's a little bit more grounded and another one that gets the fame, but he did the dirty work. So Buck Buchanan, not only Buck Buchanan, but also Willie Lanier, Bobby Bell, Jim Lynch, those guys behind him could all shine. And 2 of those guys are in the Hall of Fame.
Curley is too. Curley is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
I mean, I voted. I'm not saying I didn't vote for him.
He's in the Hall of Fame. He also
we should set this up because
we
dove into the weeds.
Well, let me get my weed whacker out then, Matty C. Okay, because I'm telling you, you're right, Adam Best. He did because he freed up Buck and Willie Lanier because he was a nose tackle. He was unique. He helped get the 3-4 defensive game plan. He helped popularize it because eventually they're in the Super Bowl against the Vikings and they're like, you know what should we do? How are we going to affect the Vikings and their potent offense? Well, what if we line up Curley over the center? And the Vikings were like, oh, bleep, we have no idea what to do. Now we got to double team Curley because he's dominating the center. Now all of a sudden you have Willie and Buck having one-on-one to the outside. So again, to me, it's almost like Jan Stenerud, where if you help change the game, you help popularize a position, you help advance a position, right? Yeah, the statistics might not be as good as Jerry, right? But when you change the game, that has to count for something. So in my opinion, Curley helped change the game, not just for the Chiefs, but nationally as well. That to me goes into the equation here.
Yeah, it's an impact thing, right? I mean, there's a whole paragraph in Curley's Wikipedia page that Sterling was kind of summarizing there, where Hank Stram was like, okay, we're gonna move him to this new position. And it just completely broke the Minnesota Vikings' brains. They didn't know what to do, and the Chiefs dominated them in that Super Bowl. So you could argue without Curley Culp and his skill set, maybe the Chiefs were not favored in that game, as I recall. They think they were still underdogs. The AFL was still underdogs to the mighty, mighty NFL at that time. Without Curley and what he brought to the table, the Chiefs, as Matt Connor sips his tea, awaiting his moment to just tear down this great Chiefs achievements. And then, yes, when you look at the totality of his career, he was absolutely incredible. Winning Defensive Player of the Year, of course, with the Oilers. Second team All-Pros, 4 of those, 6 Pro Bowls. And, of course, he's in the Kansas City Chiefs Hall of Fame. But, again, I just think he's one of these trailblazers that you look back. He's one of the – man, Curley Culp is – when I hear old-timers talk about the Chiefs, I always hear them mention Curley Culp. Curley and Buck. Willie Lanier, they always mention those guys. That alone gets you high up on the list for me.
He's just a bad dude. He was the 1967 NCAA heavyweight wrestling champion, just a stud. And we mentioned Vince Wilfork earlier in the podcast. He's a forefather of all those guys. Do they really even exist without Curley Culp laying down the foundation that you can play like this, that you can be a clogger that causes 2 offensive linemen to focus on you to free up the rest of the defense?
Connor?
Hey, look, I'm not anti-Culp. I guess I just
sounds like it.
Well, look, I've got no culpability in this other than to say, look, I'll say this. Adam Best has done a great job of identifying the subjective nature of these lists and saying, hey, all of us have to make certain decisions about how we rank these things. And one of the differentiators here can be what they did with the club while they were there, and then sort of kind of forgetting or at least letting what they did with other teams fade to the background. Like greatest Chiefs, meaning what they do with the Chiefs. I'm not sure I had a hard and fast rule on that for all players, but when I'm looking at Curley Culp, whenever we were doing this, that's what I was thinking was, you know what? He should go down as a true all-time Oiler. He's a Chiefs Hall of Famer for sure. I've got him at 40. I've got him on my list. I'm not ignoring him. But when there are other players more decorated during their Chiefs tenure, I went with him. And I think, and I'll just add this, I think even the Chiefs themselves were late to celebrate him. Like he wasn't inducted in their own Hall of Fame until like 2008. It's not like right after he retired, everyone was going, let's get that guy in our Hall. I mean, it even took time for the general NFL and the Chiefs to go, you know what? This guy deserves more credit. So I'm going to put myself there too and go, you know what? I'm aligning myself with the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the Chiefs and being a late admirer. I put him at 40. Maybe in 20 years, I'll have him up higher. But here's where I stand today.
I think it's completely fair. And I've tried doing the same thing too, where you take out what they do for other teams. But again, for me, it was the legacy factor.
Sure.
Like what he meant for the NFL as well, changing the game, being a nose tackle. Like that was so unique. And so almost creating, again, your own position the way that Jan Stenerud, to an extent, almost created a kicker-only position. That, to me, meant value. And that was not as a Houston Oiler. That was as a Kansas City Chief.
Sure.
It's a little hard to men in black yourself and forget what they did for another team. Like Jared Allen was a really hard one. And
what do you mean? He never played for another team. He only played for 4 years or something for Kansas City. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the differences here is I actually saw him wear purple and play for Carolina and do all these other things. And we didn't see that with Curley Culp. He's just a Chief to us. So it's maybe a little bit hard to make that distinction there. Is this the best name in Chiefs history, other than DiCaprio Boodle, of course?
100%. Curley Culp is like a true all-time football, even athlete name, other than Dick Trickle in racing.
Yeah. You had Curly, Buck, and Willie. Like those three, just all three, you're just cruising. Sorry, you're not getting past Buck, Willie, and Curly. Like that's the Three Stooges of pain.
Oh, that's great. We should make a T-shirt with their first names on it. The Three Stooges. But we can't call them Stooges. We call them like ministers or
the Three Ministers of Pain is much better.
Pain, yeah. By the way, you mentioned Matt Connor. You were talking about Dick. And my favorite.
What?
No.
You were talking about
I'm going on the record.
Come again?
You were talking about Dick Trickle.
No, I'm on the record. Absolutely not did I do whatever he just said I did.
And if we're talking about great names in Chiefs history, let's not forget about one of my favorite ever Chiefs coaches, who at the time I used to call Father Time, quarterbacks coach, Dick Curl. You guys remember Dick Curl?
I remember Richard.
He was like 107 years old, and we couldn't figure out why our quarterbacks were never any good. And the Chiefs were just bringing out this guy who was still teaching them that they couldn't throw the forward pass. And it was Dick Curl.
Well, he liked curl routes.
Right. He did.
I'm 12 years old right now.
Yeah. I mean, why not just,
Adam's looking at all of us like the headmaster.
We haven't even moved on. We haven't even talked about Jim Bob Cooter yet.
At number.
Yeah, that's all for today, kids. All right, let's move on. And actually, it's funny you guys were talking about, when we're talking about Curly and we're talking about people that went from the Chiefs and were really good and maybe didn't get the recognition that they deserved and then went to another team.
Wait, no.
Are you okay?
There's a mute button, man.
What? Dick Curl, Curley Culp, Sergeant Dick York. I'm going with this Matt Connor.
I don't know what's happening. Sterling's just completely lost it. Somebody give him the laughing gas. Explain yourself.
I'm not sure there's any explanation.
We're in it now.
Great radio here. Captivating.
This is good content. Do you have it together? Should I continue?
You're good.
All right. As we mentioned, We talked about Curley Culp. He goes from one team to another and sort of gets recognized for how great he had been also in Kansas City. I think that happened on the flip side to the player that we're going to talk about next on our list here, which is number 26, Mitchell Schwartz, who played for 2 teams in his career and started out in Cleveland on just absolutely dreadful Cleveland Browns teams. But he was incredible in Cleveland, was overshadowed. That was when they had like Alex Mack playing center and Joe Thomas at left tackle. So you're on a bad team, a horrible team, and you're playing with 2 other really, really incredible offensive linemen. So they're sucking up all of the attention. Mitchell Schwartz got none of it during his time in Cleveland, comes to Kansas City and wins a first-team All-Pro in 2018, gets 3 second-team All-Pros in 2016, 2017, and 2019, and wins the Super Bowl, was absolutely unstoppable. Who's got it together enough to talk about Mitchell Schwartz? Let's go, Adam.
I think I'm process of elimination. It's got to be me. Yeah, you want to talk about a guy that was like living off of stale Ritz crackers and then got a filet mignon, the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation, and then going to Kansas City and getting the opportunity to play eventually with Patrick Mahomes. Quite the journey for him. But he became maybe the best player at his position for like a good 2 or 3 years, the best right tackle in football. And that has to be very meaningful, especially when you do it on the team that breaks the 50-year Super Bowl drought. Just a god tier technician, not the guy that went to the combine, which we call the underwear Olympics sometimes, and blew it away. But and I don't know if it was his time with Andy Heck or being a teammate of Joe Thomas, really one of the best tackles of all time. You don't hear much about that because he languished in Cleveland for all those years, but just a phenomenal player and really at 5 years, $33 million, best bargain in franchise history. It has to be up there. And it's just a damn shame that his back took him out of action prematurely, because I think he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He could still be the Chiefs tackle. And, if he has 3 Lombardis and continued playing at that level, I think he was on his way to Canton. So it's just a damn shame. But he's still, I think, one of our favorite Chiefs here on this show. I think a lot of Chiefs Kingdom feels the same way. He's very involved with the fan base and just got to absolutely love this guy.
Yeah, of his 5 years in Kansas City, 4 of them were all pros, right? 4 of them were all pros. 1 first-team All-Pro, 3 second-team All-Pros. Somehow no Pro Bowls, which is kind of the whole – he's like the forefather of basically understanding that Pro Bowls are not really the best valuation of a player, that all pros are the real measure, typically. Not the real measure, but the better measure of what a guy did in his career, more so than Pro Bowls. He was the best right tackle in football for a 5-year period of his time here in Kansas City. It was insane. Like, it didn't matter who you were. Any Tom, any John, any Dick, didn't matter. You were getting blocked into oblivion by Mitchell Schwartz. The fact of the matter is, you're right. He wasn't the most physical. He wasn't the quickest guy, but he had the best technique. He always found a way to get it done. You never saw pressure coming from the right side because he was that damn good. Yeah, that's why I have him. That's why I think we all have more we have him. It's easy because we can see him. I think offensive linemen in general are very hard to rank unless you've seen them in person, because you're like, okay, yeah, I saw him and I saw what he did to the best pass rushers. We don't always know back in the day, but with Schwartz, we saw it with our own eyes, and that dude is absolutely elite.
Yeah, never mind his Iron Man streak. And that's what's such a bummer about his career kind of coming to a premature end because of injuries, because up into a certain point, this was a guy who never left the field. He went 7,894 snaps, which was at that time the longest active streak among NFL players. And it was his 122nd consecutive game starting, only behind Phillip Rivers, who did 218, and another old friend, Brandon Carr, who did 184. He was incredibly durable during his career, and he just did not give up sacks. And sometimes he didn't even give up any pressures. He was amazing. Matt Connor, talk to us about Mitchell Schwartz.
Boy, I mean, I love Mitchell Schwartz. I had him high. I think we all did here, obviously, as he averaged out. One, I'm a huge John Dorsey apologist. He takes his hits for like the way he handled the cap, but you got to give him credit. He signed this guy out of Cleveland, maybe the best free agent signing ever in Chiefs history. He locks down the line. If you think about what we had with Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz outside for the Chiefs, and then look at the ways they've scrambled to get tackles after those guys. Like in one fell swoop, both those guys go down at the same time. And then suddenly we're handing out contracts that are being criticized, like Jawan Taylor, 4 years, $80 million. We're paying through the nose for a right tackle who's getting penalized all the time. We're trading for Orlando Brown Jr. We're throwing a third at Lucas Niang. Can't make that work. Throwing a third at Wanya Morris. Shrug at that. Like, we're still talking in some ways in quizzical terms about the bookends, knowing that in the middle is where the strength is. But when Mitchell Schwartz is playing, he's playing next to Andrew Wiley. When Eric Fisher's playing, he's playing next to like Cam Irving. Remember the crazy rotation of left guards, Mike McGlynn, Cameron Irving. I guess you'd have some, maybe Wiley there. Like, it was a turnstile that was like the worst position on the Chiefs for years next to Fisher. And I don't know that right guard was that much better. It's not like these guys were even getting help, which to me makes them even better than we remember them. Schwartz was totally unappreciated, great at his position. I think he helped rewrite the book and made people think critically about, oh, maybe it's not just left tackles who were so valuable, but tackles in general. And he was by far the best player up front to help stabilize that line. You guys were totally right when you say it's a shame his back hurt because he could still be that guy today. I wish he was, for the sake of his legacy.
And the Chiefs were chasing tackle for a long time before that too. I mean, from Trezell Jenkins to Wills Vitek to Patrick's guy, Damian Sacintosh.
Sacintosh, Donald Stevenson. I mean, I had the on the podcast when we started the podcast. I used to have awards that I would give out, and one of them was the Donald Stevenson Turnstile Award for Offensive Line Futility was the name of the award, and I'd give that out whenever one of the Chiefs players was just absolutely terrible. But thankfully, they've been so good. I retired the award because it just wasn't happening. It was horrible for years and years and years. And Mitchell was, you're right, he was on a Hall of Fame track. Like, would he have made it if he continued to play at the level that he was playing at and won these Super Bowls? He'd have a damn good argument. He'd probably have a couple more first or second team All-Pros, getting the shine of playing in front of Patrick Mahomes for longer. I think he'd have had a shot. Maybe not first ballot guy, but because he's like 34 now, so he would have been starting to decline. I think he still lives in Kansas City, and he's part of the Chiefs community still. That also, I thought, got him points for me in the way that he embraced this part of his career. Although I did see him tweet over draft weekend about some of the contracts he sees going out. He says maybe his back's starting to feel a little bit better. A little wink, wink from Mitchell.
Do not blame him. It's crazy to me that Eric Fisher made 2 Pro Bowls and Schwartz made 0. That kind of frames the Pro Bowl in a pretty negative light, in my opinion. Not that Fisher was bad, that he was never close to the best player at his position, right?
Yeah, well-known number 1 overall pick and all that. Hey, listen, everybody, we've got to get out of here. But this has been a lot of fun. We're going to be back with the next 5. So make sure you're subscribed to the Arrowhead Addict podcast or YouTube channel if you're not already, so you can follow. Who do we have at number 1? It's a huge mystery. We'll see you guys next time. But for Adam Best, Matt Connor, Sterling Holmes, my name is Patrick Allen. Shout out to producer Richard. We'll see you next time. But until then, go Chiefs.